Well, hey there YouTube, how you doing today? This is Robert and I'm coming to you once again bringing you another video about narcissistic and Jezebelian type behavior. Now before I do that, let me just say that I want to thank you for stopping by my channel. I want to certainly give a shout out to all of you that subscribe to this channel. If you haven't done it already, go down below and just hit the subscribe button. If you like this video, also like it and share it as well. You know, one of the things that I found out over the years, and of course more specifically as we are coaching people who are going through narcissistic abuse, we're even coaching narcissists, people that have been bound from their childhood and want to either come out from narcissistic abuse or come out from being the abuser. So we're coaching people. In our coaching platform, one of the things that we consistently get to is the topic of the type of home that you grew up in or the environment you grew up in. So today what I want to do is talk about, were you raised in a narcissistic home? Okay. Now, this can go really long. My intention is to keep it relatively short, 15, 20 minutes, no more. But there's a lot to talk about here. So be patient and know that in this video, clearly I'm not talking about everything. This insidious behavior of narcissism, the insidious spirit of Jezebel, combined with the codependent and Ahab type of behaviors and, of course, spirit, is a major problem today. And again, we're finding out that a lot of people, when we talk about what occurred in their home, have been in homes where they were raised, in many cases, by narcissistic parents, or usually one parent is narcissistic and the other one is probably more of a codependent type. Regardless, now you could have both parents that are narcissistic, or you can have just simply one. But the thing about narcissistic parents as we talk about this, they have a major problem in their life that stems from their own childhood. They went through trauma, dysfunction, abuse, many times rejection themselves. And it has become a pattern, many times cyclical, or what we would refer to as generational. So if you grew up in a narcissistic home, just know that your parents or your parent, that they came from some level of dysfunction and more than likely had some type of trauma in their own life, which enabled them to become narcissistic. Now, narcissistic parents or a narcissistic parent basically become very possessive. They become possessive of their children or their child. And they become very threatened by the thought of that child one day leaving them. Perhaps they even become envious of that child, the things that child has, the things that child does. Many times a narcissistic parent will look at the child and see them as everything they want it to be. So therefore, because they feel threatened by that due to their envy, they will actually attack or abuse or wound that child emotionally. Of course, as the child grows and it looks more and more like that child is going to leave them, perhaps for a relationship, getting married for their own, going off to school, whatever it may be, a career, what have you, the narcissistic parent is threatened by that. Now, what we're finding out in our coaching lane is that the narcissistic parent or parents, they look at their children or their child as a form of supply. It's part of their feeder system that a narcissist has. And it's designed to satisfy their own internal hurt, their own internal pain, and their need to self-medicate, to anesthetize their own internal emotional pain and conflict. See, they have their own dysfunction. They have their own wounds. This is why they're narcissistic. So many times they'll look to their children as a supply to actually anesthetize the internal pain that they have. Now, they'll do this in a lot of different ways. Control, manipulation, domination, rejection. It can be other things, incest, molestation. It could be physical abuse, emotional abuse, whatever it may be. Okay, these would be points of trauma. Now, they don't always know what they're doing. Some of them just simply do it subconsciously because their own personal lives have been arrested emotionally at a very young age, and they really don't know how to do anything other than what they're doing. So they're doing it more from a subconscious perspective. Yet many times, a narcissist will know, or a narcissistic parent will know what they're doing and intentionally look to abuse. Now, all this is done internally in them to really normalize their dysfunction, to basically cover up the wound, again, anesthetize that wound, and create an alter identity, an identity that does not look at their own pain, but now looks to create or paint their face to be something that they're not, which of course involves them abusing other people to lift them up. Obviously, if they push other people down or control other people, then they have a sense of superiority, a sense of being dominant. And again, it's all designed because they're hurting themselves. But what they'll do many times is they'll place, a narcissistic parent will place a false burden. They'll place a false responsibility on their child. Perhaps that's you. Perhaps growing up, you found that you were always doing things almost like a servant or slave to your parent. That there was a false burden, a false responsibility placed on you, the child, the young child. That could have been your mom. It could have been your dad. Many times it'll be a female to her father or a son to his mother. Okay? And I have another video out called Narcissistic Men and Their Mothers. Now, this doesn't mean that it's just men and their mothers. It could be daughters and their fathers, or you can mix it up a little bit and daughters and mothers and sons and fathers. But more often than not, we see that one of the parents, if not both, put a false burden or false responsibility on that child. Now, they could also go the other extreme and make that, or a child, the golden child, where nothing is good enough for their little Jimmy. Okay? Now, all of this has a severe effect on the child. In this case, you. One day, past days gone by, obviously you were a child, just like I was. And I can speak pretty good to this because I had a mother who was, I would view today, somewhat narcissistic. Maybe not classified medically as a narcissist, but clearly had narcissistic characteristics. And one of the things that she put on me as a young child, she put on me the responsibility that a young child should never have. Let me give you an example. When I was 7 years old, my dad, my biological father, passed away. I remember that day. It's very vivid in my mind if I want to recall it. And I remember going home and being told that day that my dad had died. Now, I'm 7 years old, and family was crying. My mother was obviously had been crying. I could tell she was upset, and she began to, in her own way, tell me about my dad was no longer here, that he was dead. And then she said something to this effect, this regard. She said to me, "You're the man," or something like, you need to be the man of the family now. I didn't know then, obviously, at the age of 7, what I know today. Of course, we have researched a lot of this stuff. We've worked with hundreds and thousands of people in the area of deliverance, healing, and wholeness. One of the things I found out is it's at that point that my mother cast the responsibility on me and really looked to me in her own narcissistic way to fulfill an emotional need. She actually looked to replace me as her husband from an emotional standpoint. So she looked for me to comfort her rather for her to comfort me. Now that's called a false responsibility and false burden. And without going through all the time, I can tell you this, that that was cast on me followed me through life up and well into my 20s. Created a lot of different dysfunction in my own life that I had to go through healing and deliverance in. I had to renew my mind. I had to see myself completely different. What I was always doing in my life is I felt this inherent need to always please my mother. Again, that's what the narcissists do. You're part of that feeder system to be the supply to their own internal problem. Now we could talk more about that, and again, I would recommend that if you want to learn more, that you go to our website, summersministries.com, to learn more about our coaching lane, or call the office 614-428-5550. Let's get you set up, and we can help you. But let me give you some things that perhaps you've kind of identified, or perhaps just simply know something's wrong, and maybe this will help you understand this whole thing a little bit more if you were raised by a narcissist. How does this affect children? What's the effect on a child? Well, a couple of different things. One, we know that every child is different. So with me, how I handled that which was cast on me, I took the more passive route. I became rejected. And this is something that children do. They become rejected because what I had to do when that was said to me, that you're the man of the family now, I had to open up my mind and begin to explore and say, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? And of course, it's at that moment in time that you open up a doorway or a pathway for demonic spirits to actually come in and lie to you, because that's all they can do is lie and deceive, and begin to tell you, such as they told me, well, if you're the man of the family now, you can't cry, you can't show emotion, can't ask questions, because men don't do that. You have to act like you know everything. So throughout life, I became pretty cold and callous, at least emotionally, and I certainly didn't know how to handle things emotionally. So rather than being aggressive with it, I was passive, and I became very rejected, if not self-rejected, as well as a fear of being rejected. You can also find yourself avoiding conflict. Okay, that was me. I never wanted to be engaged in conflict. Clearly now I'm healed of that, but I didn't want to be involved in conflict. So that's another effect that can perhaps be on you today. And you could be 30, 40, 50 years removed from your childhood. You could become a person that is more compliant. You can be a person that really wants to avoid things. You just comply with the wishes of other people. Because one of the things that has happened to you when you were young is a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, a lot of blame. That's what your parents probably did. They shamed you, they blamed you, they put a tremendous amount of guilt, and internally you began to say, well, it's my fault. What did I do wrong? And all through life, you can end up thinking like that. Rejected, what did I do wrong? Blame, this big, guilt trip, blame. You end up having a low self-esteem, a devaluation of self. A sense that occurred from even your childhood where perhaps your emotions are arrested at whatever point of time, mine was 7. You're arrested in your emotional development and you begin to think that you don't measure up. So when you feel you don't measure up, what we end up doing is we end up overcompensating. So we try to be perfect. We try to do everything for our narcissistic parents or our narcissistic parent. And then, of course, as we get older and we go through adolescence, and then, of course, we get into high school and college and perhaps even get married, we find ourselves always trying to be that perfect husband or that perfect wife. And when we do that, we basically are trying to earn somebody's love or earn somebody's attention. Many times, this is what we were doing when we were children. We may be so inferior or have a sense of inferiority or a low self-esteem or a tremendous lack of confidence that we when there's conflict, we may isolate ourselves. We have problems dealing sociably with people, with society. We're afraid. We have a lot of fears and phobias. We isolate. We stay away. We avoid. And of course, that can lead to depression, self-abuse, perhaps addictions, even cutting oneself. All designed to have you self-medicate your pain. Now, those are just a few of the things that could have happened to you stemming from your childhood. But sometimes people they go from one end of the spectrum to the other. And you could become what's called the aggressive type child, or now the aggressive adult. This is where these things happen to you from your narcissistic parents, who, by the way, you love dearly, and you should, but they had problems. And in order to deal with that, or some of the effects of that, you became aggressive. So you went from, you're not the passive type, you became more, the way you dealt with it was be aggressive. This is where we see a lot of people getting involved in rebellious type activities, corruption, crime. They become very angry, okay? Perhaps some of you are married to a spouse, very angry, throwing things, breaking things, punching holes in walls, threatening, intimidating. See, this is the beginning of a child who was raised in a narcissistic home, potentially being developed into and ultimately becoming a narcissist themselves. The other person that's passive typically takes on more of the characteristics we see in codependence. Again, the rejection, the blame, or the acceptance of blame, okay? The need to earn one's love and attention and so on. And of course, the addictions and the abuses to themselves. But this type of person that's on the aggressive side, they become rebellious. So they become rebellious against law, against authorities, against school systems. It's all about them. And they become very, very angry, and they begin to hate and demonstrate and say things that are very hateful, even racist in many cases. Okay? They're very self-seeking. It's all about them. It's self-will. They don't care about anybody else. They are the typical controllers today in life. They accuse others, blame others. They create a theatrical performance in their own world that has them believe that they're okay, everybody else is defective. The reason they do that is because of the internal pain they have from being raised by or in a narcissistic home themselves. And then, of course, they will not accept responsibility for any of their actions. And again, they end up, in many cases, simply being a narcissist themselves. Now, somewhere in this is what we call the middle ground. It's the typical Jekyll-Hyde. This is the one where the pendulum went from, as a youngster, the passive to in the aggressive side, to kind of balancing out. It's a way a person tries to balance out this internal trauma, this whirlwind, this hurricane that's going on deep in their soul, where they try to balance things out. There's so much pain everywhere that they try to balance things out. And this is where a lot of anxiety, panic attacks, anxiety begins to come in. Because they're thinking internally, why don't people accept me? Why am I not loved? Why do people not love me? And it creates an internal anger that actually can bring them to a place where they connect with people, but they connect with people in a perverted type way, even to the point where they engage in people and engage in other people's addictions, or they become addicted to people, or look for people to become addicted or needy of them. So they'll run, it's really interesting, they'll run, and I'll do another video on this specifically because I think there's a lot to talk about here, but they'll run both sides of the spectrum. They'll play two ends against the middle, as it were. Now they have a lot of internal anger. And in order, again, to anesthetize their own pain, many times they'll get involved in drugs, alcohol, other type of addictions, pornography, perversions, harlotry, relationship addiction, going from relationship to relationship. They can be very, very promiscuous in all aspects of life, not just sexual. They can become, through their need or desire to make people love them, very seductive, lure you into a den of destruction. Very deceptive. And again, of course, they're constantly looking to balance things out. So today what I want to do in this video is simply just make you aware that it's a real thing. you're not crazy. If you were raised in a narcissistic home, or you had one or more of your parents that were controlling, intimidating, dominating, very theatrical, very abusive, and you came out feeling rejected, perhaps you were molested, abused emotionally or physically, then this has or can have some effect on your life. Now, we're here to help you. Again, one of the greatest things we're finding out is in our ministry, as we minister to people, is coach people through the process. Now, you don't turn a battleship on a dime. It takes time. Deliverance is a journey. But if you want to get the results that you deserve and take your life back and become that person that God ordained you to be, whatever that is that He specifically gave you, we need you. You're certainly valuable. Give us a call, 614-428-5550. Again, 614-428-5550. Or just go to the website, summersministries.com. Click on our coaching and therapy tab. Learn a little bit more. Set up your appointment with us. Now, we're very busy, obviously. A lot of people have problems, but we're here to help. And we believe that you will be able to take your life back. So again, just want to thank you. And again, if this video is a blessing to you, hit the like button, share it with other people. If you're not a subscriber, subscribe. We got a lot of cool things going on. And again, we look forward to seeing you next time around. Again, thank you guys. We appreciate you. We love you. And be blessed.